My name is Stefan Botha and I own Rainmaker Marketing, which is based in Durban, South Africa. We are a specialized branding company that works primarily with property developers and luxury residential developments around South Africa, Mauritius and Mozambique. We started just over 3 years ago, and in that time we have been responsible for the successful launch of over 50 residential developments. We've also been fortunate enough to be the team behind the most successful launch of a residential development in South Africa's history, and we have also created standalone divisions for design, public relations, social media, strategy, as well as sales. I think from the absolute get-go, the vision for Rainmaker Marketing as a business was to establish a very, very, very narrow niche. I really believe that you can't be everything to everyone, especially when you are starting up a new business. And my objective was to be very focused about what we did and what we offered, and to do it exceptionally well, and to be synonymous with a very, very small element of the market. And there's no doubt that we lost certain business initially because people wanted a broader service or people wanted something different, and it was very, very tempting to try and offer certain things that we weren't totally on top of, or that we didn't have the relevant expertise, or to really broaden our focus. But at the end of the day, it was a massive blessing for us in terms of focusing on what we knew well, and it helped us pick up the key business that we wanted. I think as South Africans, we are really fortunate in the sense that although we are an emerging economy and we're quite a small country in the context of things, there is a very strong entrepreneurial culture that exists. I mean, if you look at very successful entrepreneurs that have come out of South Africa, like the likes of Elon Musk or Sol Kerzner, people have really taken on the world and have really, really excelled and made massive names for themselves. And I think we live in a society where it is encouraged, and where people have really been able to seize various opportunities that exist in the market. We've got a very active consumer market, especially in the market that I'm in the property market. It's a very strong market and does exceptionally well in primary residential as well as second home markets, and it gave me an opportunity to find a niche. At the time, before Rainmaker Marketing was started, I was the marketing director for quite a large property developer, which was also based here in KZN, and had worked with lots of property developers along the way. But it was actually one day while out on a run that I came up with the idea to provide a very, very niche solution to property developers, which was a lot more niche than anyone else was offering at the time, and one that I really felt there was a need for within the property development space. I think that the secret to me having made the move at the time away from a more of a corporate scenario was the fact that once I had the idea and once I had the bee in my bonnet, I tried to move as quickly as I could. I actually happened to resign within about 2 weeks of running and starting on the idea. And I think if I hadn't done that, I probably would have got cold feet and pulled out. But I made the decision and stuck with it, and quite fortunate that I did, and that I am in the position that I am in terms of running my own business today. I think the key thing that motivated me from the outset to take the plunge effectively and start up Rainmaker Marketing was the fact that I had quite a key passion to want to do something different within the industry that I knew. I really believe quite strongly that if you don't have the passion from the word go, that it's going to be very difficult to have a business idea that's going to be sustainable going forward. I think if you look at so many entrepreneurs in the past who've spoken about loving what you do, being passionate about it, and choosing an industry that you have some form of knowledge of, as opposed to just chasing some idea where you think you can make a quick buck somewhere along the line. I think entrepreneurship encounters so many different perils and problems along the way that if you're not exceptionally passionate about what you're doing, if you don't clearly believe that what you're doing is unique and can make a key difference within a chosen market, that when you start reaching certain problems and pitfalls along the way, that your chances of throwing in the towel or giving up or losing sight of that key focus is going to be a lot more likely, which is probably the first, probably quite a key factor in terms of not being a success. The key thing about starting any new business, I guess, is the fact that it's exceptionally invigorating to start off with, and you sort of feed off your own energy, and the idea of being on your own and being able to call the shots and not having to work for anyone. It really does psych you up, and it certainly psyched me up. I think the biggest challenge comes after that, in terms of once you've gone through the motions of setting yourself up, and generally the first client comes along quite quickly because you've got the energy and you've got that drive and determination. But it's just how you put the pieces in place after that I found the most challenging. And to realize that there's no prior copy and paste scenario someone can give you that is going to equip you for how you evolve as an entrepreneur or as a business owner. And I think for me, the biggest thing was that I started a business within a field that I knew very well, and having had the experience in that field, having understood how it works, and having built relationships up with suppliers and clients and so forth, it really helped equip me, and that's why I feel it's so important to have some prior experience in the area that one may choose. I think with any entrepreneur, I think the first customers you get are those you're going to thank for the rest of your life, because they are effectively the people who buy into whatever passion you may have, regardless of what the product may be. I was quite fortunate in the sense that I moved into industry I knew and probably had an existing network of people who I could call on, and I happened to have one very loyal client who I signed up with very shortly after starting, which is enough to take the immediate risk out of starting a business, and it meant that I had some form of income for the first little while, but there was also no guarantee that it's going to exist beyond a very short period. So it was enough to move me into that space, but also enough to really keep me on my toes, and it gave me the confidence to move forward and go sourcing other clients. And I think getting the first clients in place is obviously the key element, because you then use that as a test case going forward, and it's natural to sell beyond what you have offered up to that point, because otherwise there's no way of saying that vision. But I was fortunate in the sense. I've heard it said many times from people I've spoken to or books that I've read when it comes to the saying that network equals net wealth. And I really believe quite strongly in that saying, in the sense that the support and the base and the network that one builds up, maybe only when you started a business, or maybe that you're fortunate enough to bring into a business, it really is the key to any business. And I really believe that the most important element is playing open cards and chatting to as many people as you can possibly chat to within the industry or outside of the industry, and building really, really key, healthy alliances as one goes along, whether it be through regular catch-up with a cup of coffee with someone, or attending networking events or workshops or whatever it may be. And I believe that there are so many new business owners who try and keep their cards so close to their chest because they're so protective of their particular idea that they have, and so protective over that intellectual property that they possess, or so worried that someone's going to steal their idea. But I believe that that's counterproductive in the sense that the more you talk to people about your ideas or your visions, or the way you want to go as a business, the more goodwill is attached to you as an entity, and the more people want to surround themselves with you, be associated with you, and buy into that vision. I also believe quite strongly, especially being in a marketing or branding industry, that there are no enemies. You may have competitors, but the relationship with those competitors need to be nurtured. And I believe that you've got to keep your enemies close, but at the same time, there is always synergy, and there are always different ways to approach things. There are always ways to chat to competitors on the basis of how one could potentially work together. So often people have got capacity issues and need to outsource and need to work together to build their own respective brands. But there is such a massive opportunity to share knowledge, to share ideas, and to grow collectively, as opposed to trying to forge ahead on one's own, isolate oneself from those that have really, really good value to give. And I believe that's the only way one can grow. One of the really, really important things, though, in terms of alliances and partnerships, is that from the word go, one has got to make sure that you do not compromise in terms of who you align with, especially when you are in a service-related industry or any related industry where you're dependent on quality of work, as we all would be, and where you need to rely on certain suppliers to do things, where you need to outsource, whether maybe production or whatever, design or any of those capabilities. It's so important that one accepts and realizes from the word go, even if budgets are tight, that aligning with the best is the only way you are going to grow in line with the vision you want, but also that compromising on cost initially probably will cost you more in the long run, whether it be rectifying mistakes that have been made, or whether it comes to the reputational damage and the associated costs with that further down the track. I think as an entrepreneur or a new business on the block as such, the only way you can build repeat business is through doing what you do exceptionally well for a particular client. I've realized, I always spoke about it, but never really realized how important word of mouth was, and how if you keep one client happy, I know everyone talks about it, that they will refer you, and that their referral to someone of influence means so much more than that person having read it anywhere else, whatever. And it's so true, and a huge amount of our repeat business or referral business has been long-term business. So I think to secure repeat business, the key is really to keep communicating. Any clients that is worth having as a client will accept the mistakes do happen, but as long as you keep them informed, as long as you keep making them understand or realize that you are there to sort the problem out, that's how trust and long-standing relationship will be built. I was quite fortunate in the sense that I started up a service-related business where initially I was purely selling my own time and didn't have massive startup costs in terms of infrastructure or staffing or whatever else it may have been. So I guess I knew what I needed to cover per month, and I worked around that, knowing that if for whatever reason it didn't work out, I had the ability to go back into a corporate environment without owing too much to banks or whatever else it may have been. So I was fortunate in that sense, but it also made me realize that the barriers to entry in terms of starting up a new business are a lot lower than what one thinks, and a lot easier to achieve. And once I'd got momentum going in terms of clients and selling my time, I was able to manage it accordingly and then obviously expand from there. But I was never in a situation where I needed much startup capital from anyone else, or where I was heavily leveraged in terms of owing money to banks or anyone else for that matter. And then it was only really when I needed to employ a person to back up what I was doing that the need for an office arose, and the location was pretty much determined by cost at the time in terms of an entry-level office. But obviously, as a marketing company, we wanted to create the right perception from the word go. So the location was based on an office that had the right sense of arrival, the right location that was easy to access for clients, and we tried to create an environment where clients were impressed and where clients felt comfortable to come to, and where we could host clients in a boardroom environment. So that's pretty much how our journey began. Any new business owner or entrepreneur would be lying if they said that there were no obstacles from the word go. I think that the main obstacle that I think any entrepreneur who's ever come up with a business idea has experienced, unless being very fortunate with big funding or big backing, has been cash flow. And I think that nothing in any textbook can really prepare you for how much you will learn about accounting and the management of money from the word go. And it certainly was quite a big obstacle for me in starting a new business and being very restricted initially in terms of what could be done and what could not be done, which in hindsight was probably quite a benefit in terms of being forced to be very strategic about the planning and the rollout of the business and really scaling down everything initially until some form of a brand was built. I think any new business or any new entrepreneur has to be risk averse to an extent, or I certainly was to start off with. And I think for me, it all boiled down to cash flow and knowing that if I managed my cash flow correctly and had a very, very clear idea of what was coming in and what I had to budget for going forward, that I could make decisions based on that, and that my risk profile ultimately was determined by that. But I think the other factor or the other obstacle is just the fact that personally it takes quite a big toll initially, and it can really become all-encompassing. It probably was very all-encompassing for me initially, and it was something I had to learn to try and limit and try and monitor as I move forward, because once you throw yourself into entrepreneurship, it's all or nothing. And it's, for me, probably the biggest challenge was balancing the desire to succeed as an entrepreneur with other elements such as family and friends, and just being present in those other spheres and outside of business. But I think the key is that if you look at the whole scenario of short-term pain and long-term gain, as a lot of people put it, the key is that if you know where you're going and you know what the vision is for that business and you are passionate and driven to achieve it, that the short-term sacrifices you make in terms of time and energy and whatever else really are quite insignificant in the greater scheme of things. Everyone always talks about the first couple of years being really, really tough, especially the first years, and for me it was everything of that. It was exceptionally tough, but I've always tried to look 10, 15, 20 years ahead in terms of where you want to be, and it really is just a drop in the ocean. I don't think I was surprised at how hard it was, but I think I was surprised at how many mistakes I made along the way and how many mistakes I made initially. And at the time, those mistakes, although they probably are quite marginal when you look back at them now, seem like massive mistakes at the time. And I think one of the biggest things that I probably wish I'd known or prepared myself for was how often I'd make those, but how down you can get on making those mistakes. And in hindsight, it would be realizing that mistakes happen and that they're there for a reason, because they make you stronger as a business and they make you realize what you need to look out for again in future, and they help you evolve. And without making mistakes, it's impossible to grow. And the key is just to ensure you don't make those mistakes again. And if you do make those mistakes, especially in a client-related business, that you communicate and that you have a very, very specific determination and need to rectify those mistakes. Very often by rectifying them and handing them the right situation, you actually build a strong relationship with your clients. I always had quite a clear vision of where I wanted to go as to where we are now, but also obviously much further down the track. And I really believe that if you're not evolving and you're not growing, then you are stagnating. So there certainly was an element of risk that needed to go into growing when it came to pitching for new business, expanding in terms of our services, or expanding in terms of staff. So I think there needs to be quite a clear balance between the two, and at the end of the day it comes down to what you need to spend to grow against what you have coming in the pipeline. It was after about 2 years when, as any business goes through a key area of reassessing cash flow and looking at where you're going, that we were tempted to expand into other areas that were non-property development related. And when we made a conscious effort to stick to our niche, that the business really went through a massive growth spurt, and where we really picked up the key clients we've been looking for such a long time, because they appreciated our very specialized focus. And one of the most consistent points that I came across was the saying that to grow your business and to be focused on the business strategy that you want to roll out, you need to focus on the business as opposed to in the business. When I first heard this, it actually made no sense to me whatsoever, and I didn't see the relevance. But I very quickly realized that one of my key strategies as a business entrepreneur, or the leader of my business, was that I had to focus on extracting myself from the day-to-day elements, which is not very easy initially when you don't have many staff or you don't have too much resource to throw around, but to try and extract myself in terms of focusing continuously at the key elements, which in my case would be bringing in business and dealing with clients, and strategically looking at the rollout and expansion of the business, as opposed to getting bogged down in the day-to-day stuff, which in many cases one can bring people on board to do, and it's quite a fine art being able to extract oneself. But without doing that, it's impossible to look at the business with a peripheral type of vision. And one of the key elements for me was the employment of staff and the strategic outlook at the importance thereof, in terms of having people who were able to take on a lot of the day-to-day stuff and focus more in the business to allow me to perform my role focusing on the business. And to me, although it's a very simple philosophy, it really has been quite integral in terms of how I've approached the rollout of Rainmaker Marketing as an entity. I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, and I think every new entrepreneur and every new business owner does. One of the key mistakes that I made initially, and sometimes one's still inclined to make them, is overcommitting, and especially being a service-related business where clients are like gold, and where you want to get clients on board, and obviously where you want to keep clients happy, that you tend to overcommit in terms of timelines, delivery dates, and resources, and it ultimately will backfire. But I think probably the biggest mistake for me as a business owner was initially in the line of appointment of staff. I think when you are a one-man band to start off with, and you then start employing people, you are so relieved to have those people on board, and you are so relieved to have taken that plunge to employ people, and you're invigorated by it all. But you sometimes jump in very quickly, in the sense that you, in many instances, are quite desperate at the time, or I was, because I reached a point where I all of a sudden realized that I need a lot of resources on board, and I probably didn't follow the right procedure when it came to employment of staff, thinking that it was quite low risk, and that I could judge people based on one interview. And that is something where I have changed and relooked at structures considerably, in terms of making sure that when employing staff, even as a small business, whether it be 3, 4, 5, even 10 staff, that you follow the same processes that any multinational corporation would follow in terms of interviews, in terms of background checks, and realizing that even if you employ someone for 3 months, there's a massive opportunity cost to that, in terms of, number one, the time and energy you put into that person, but also the damage they could do. So for me, there were often times where we took a step back after having employed someone, just because I rushed that process. And the key is that we all make mistakes, and all business owners make mistakes, but it's just to make sure that you don't continue to make those mistakes. One of the first things that I tried to do was to set pretty long-term goals. It started off 6 months, I guess one does, through to a year, and then since then I've looked at very specific 5-year goals, 10-year goals, and 20-year goals. The 5-year goal, and that is something that I try and communicate to the team as often as I can, and it's something we do have up in the office, and that is, within our field, to be the best and the biggest within Africa. And that is something we are all aware of, and hopefully the team are bought into, but something that always helps us guide our decision-making process, and often you have to choose whether you take on certain business or whether you make key decisions. And if you're always looking back at that 5-year goal, for us, it really helps clarify certain key decisions as we move forward. My 10-year goal is very specifically to diversify the business in other areas that are closely related, but pretty much unrelated to what we're doing at the moment, and especially within the property development space that we are in. And the goal for me as an entrepreneur would be to be actively involved in setting up those initiatives and those different businesses within the larger business, but to have really, really key people within each business looking after the day-to-day implementation, the day-to-day management, and I guess playing more of a sort of a mentorship or consultation role. I think one of the key lessons for me has been that as an entrepreneur in a growing business, you reach a stage obviously where you need to start employing people, and those people at the time are taking a massive leap of faith when it comes to agreeing to work for you. I mean, obviously you agree on salary and remuneration and all the rest, but they are placing massive faith because they obviously have their own futures to worry about and their own families and friends and all the rest. So they need to be seeing the long-term vision of your business and need to be buying into that, because obviously no one goes into a work scenario expecting it to be a short-term solution. So the biggest thing for me has been to learn how important it is to communicate my vision for the business on a day-to-day basis, or let's call it a weekly basis or monthly basis, and really painting the picture not only for new staff, but also for clients who buy into what this particular business or what I as an entrepreneur is trying to achieve. And by doing that, people tend to want to align with you, but it's so difficult as a business owner or entrepreneur to get so caught up in the day-to-day stuff that you forget how important it is to keep communicating where you're going as a business, what you're trying to achieve, and how important it is for people to keep needing to believe that. And that I see as being probably one of the key roles of being a business owner. For me, the management team within a small business is ultimately the rock, and it doesn't necessarily have to only be the people who hold traditional management roles, but people who are key within the business, whether it be playing more supporting roles. But at the end of the day, in a small business, everyone needs to play a management role in the sense of showing initiative, showing accountability, and showing key responsibility, and really buying into the ultimate ethos of where you want to go. But I think for me, it was largely trial and error initially, in the sense that I needed key management roles and I knew what those roles were, but we did have quite a high turnover of staff around the beginning because, number one, I rushed into the deployment process. But it's not always easy to find someone who buys into a very specific vision or a very specific ethos that you have as a small business owner or as an entrepreneur, because obviously you've started the business for a certain reason and you want to be surrounded by people who share a certain level of vision and people who you believe can help you implement and get to where you want to go. So it took me a while to reach that point, but I think once you found those people, and once you found people who are loyal and people who can achieve what you want to achieve, and people who take responsibility for certain elements, not only does it free you up to do what you need to do as an entrepreneur, and that's find new business and grow the business and share the vision and so forth, but it really allows you to value the role that those people play in the business, and I believe that once you have those people on board, you've got to do everything you can possibly do to keep them incentivized, to keep them happy, and to keep them as part of your team for as long as you possibly can. I've always said from the word go that the entrepreneurial side of the business would be one of the key cornerstones of it, and it does largely come down to the fact that you want people to be accountable and you want people to be responsible, and very often if you want people to be that, they need to be incentivized, they need to see an upside. And I think we've always spoken about big business vision, but with small business principles, and what we've always said about is that we want to create that small business element in terms of personalized service and niche solution and problem solving and all those good things, but really looking ahead as a big business, and a lot of that comes from making sure that there are different profit centers or cost centers within the business where people are understanding that they need to treat their elements of the business as almost their own business, and that how their element, whether in our scenario, whether it's public relations or whether it's design or whatever it may be, that those engines need to be self-sufficient and need to be generating their own revenue and need to be seen as isolated profit centers within a larger business. And by doing that, we've managed to get people within the business to really take ownership for their business, and that there's an element of healthy competition, but also where people know that if they perform and if their division performs, that they will be incentivized, and then that applies to everyone. If the business is doing well, then everyone needs to do well, and that's sort of philosophy that we've tried to introduce from day one, and hopefully something that we can keep evolving and keep it looking at creative ways for people to feel that they are running a business within a larger business. One piece of advice for an entrepreneur I want to give to you, I think the first one, which is probably not as important as the second one, is to find yourself a mentor. Find yourself someone who you can bounce things off, and someone who's been there, and someone who is a wise old head, and someone who cares about you enough to give you honest input and feedback, but someone who's not too close, someone who's not family or a very close friend, but someone who can give you a neutral perspective. And perspective is so important, because very often you can lose perspective very quickly, and that will be to the detriment of you and your business. But the one most important element of advice to any new business owner would be that if you don't like figures or accounting or anything related to that, you need to learn very quickly that although you might not like it, it needs to be the way in which you guide your business. And cash flow is the most important element to your business, and that if you can keep a very close track of cash flow from the day one, in terms of day one there might not be a lot coming in and there might not be much to manage, but it's so important that you have a very clear understanding of what your expenses are going to be over an extended period of time, and being very clear in terms of what's coming in over the period, so you can plan and you can forecast, and that by doing that you can make very accurate decisions related to your business when it comes to expansion, when it comes to downgrading, when it comes to forecasting problem areas, and in many cases then being forced to go and find new business or create new business, whatever it may be. But I strongly believe that if you can manage your cash flow and keep a very close tab on that whole process, you can not fail.